Our question this morning, is it a choice or are you addicted?
Ooh.
Our theme text is found in Philippians chapter 4, verse 5. Let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand.
And Jonathan, one of the most impressive features of the personal freedom we have in this country is the concept of choice. We can choose our occupation, spouse, neighborhood, and friends. We can choose how we spend our leisure, to whom we are charitable, and we can choose our style of clothing. Yes, freedom of choice is a great gift, but as with all freedoms, there is also great responsibility attached. Our freedom of choice can lead to excessive choices, which can lead to compulsive behavior, which can lead to a wide variety of addictions. How common are addictions? What flavors do they come in? Chocolate. I think that's one flavor. We'll talk about that later. Is there such a thing as a positive addiction? How dangerous can addictions be? Stay with us this morning as we attempt to further understand what makes an addiction and what are their consequences, and if the Bible speaks of such things.
The first question, what is an addiction?
The second question, how do addictions develop, and are there any addictions that are positive?
Third question, what can we do to avoid or overcome addictive behavior?
And, Jonathan, as we begin this, we're going to spend a significant amount of time in the defining process. And I will tell you folks right now that all of the defining we're doing up front is somebody else's thinking, not ours. We are borrowing from many, many, many individuals. We're really going to be working with an article, for the most part, in the first hour by V. Smitha, written December 16th, 2001, called What is Addiction? And Jonathan, this is an important subject because addictions are really very prevalent in our world these days. And they seem to be coming out more and more and more, and you got to ask yourself, why does this happen, and how do we get to where we are?
Yeah, and you never really heard about addictions years and years ago in history.
Right, and so the question is, well, were they there? And I think they were, but simply not nearly as prevalent as they are now. So we want to see if we can open this up. One other disclaimer before we start here. This is not the Dr. Jonathan and Dr. Rick program.
No.
The only credentials we have is that we have looked into the issue, have had experiences with our own compulsive behaviors, we might say, and are trying to just understand it better. And most of what we read to you and talk about at the beginning of the program is going to be based on other people's thinking. When we get into the scriptures, I think that there is a scriptural reasoning that helps us deal with such behaviors. And that's where you'll hear a lot more of our own thinking coming through on this. But this is too big a subject that we do not have personal expertise on. So again, we are borrowing from others. And folks, if you have a thought on is it a choice or are you addicted, let us know. Jonathan, why don't we get started? What is an addiction?
All right, why don't we read from V. Smitha? An addiction is an activity or substance we repeatedly crave to experience and for which we are willing, if necessary, to pay a price or negative consequence. In recent years, researchers have considered as examples of addiction both substance addictions, alcohol, cigarettes, food, street drugs, etc., and activity addictions, gambling, impulsive sexual activity, shoplifting, overspending, etc. This article discusses techniques and concepts which can be helpful in coping with both kinds of addictive behavior.
Okay, and continuing, relatively minor addictions such as watching too much television, eating a certain kind of candy, or lying in bed on weekend mornings are often not even considered addictions because the price paid for indulging them is not high. On the other hand, we tend to use the term addict to describe the person who, at least in the eyes of others, continues an addictive behavior long enough after it may have been clear that the substantial price being paid was not worth the benefit. The individual who has lost career, house, family, and friends because of cocaine use, but is unwilling to consider stopping, is an unfortunate example. And then we move on in this article to a subheading, Am I Addicted?
Although the term addict is often used to describe someone from whom the price of the addiction outweighs the benefit, it is impossible to use this term precisely because prices and benefits are different for each individual. Furthermore, How much bigger than the benefit would the price have to be for me to be an addict? There is no clear answer to this question. It may best to reserve addict for describing oneself as opposed to others, or not to use it at all. In this article, this term will be used as a convenience to describe anyone with an addiction in which the price outweighs the benefit, no matter how slightly, from anyone else's point of view. But using the definition, probably all of us are negative addicts, according to someone.
Okay, and let's stop there for a minute and just talk about some of the things we just read here, because I think this is an important place to start. What is an addiction? In the research getting ready to do this program this morning, there were many different definitions that came out. This particular definition, actually there's another definition on the second page. I want to read that along this one. Another definition from Lynette J. Hoy says the involvement in use of a substance, a relationship, or activity to the exclusion of responsibilities.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and that goes along with what we're talking about here, the definition we're going to be focusing on. It's very subjective here. It describes anyone with addiction in which the price outweighs the benefit, no matter how slightly, from anyone else's point of view. So that's what we're looking at when you are involved in a substance use or an activity in which the price of such a thing outweighs the benefit. Then we are talking about addictive behavior. And when you look at activity, there's lots of different things you could be actively involved in, which the price of that activity, it becomes counterproductive.
Okay.
Substance use is the same thing. And, it mentioned things like alcohol, cigarettes, food, stress, street drugs, and those sorts of things. And obviously when you're involved in illegal drugs, for instance, you got a lot of problems.
Oh, yeah.
Illegal. I mean, that's the first word that ought to bring up a little red flag. Hello. But what ends up happening is when whatever that is begins to control you, and the price that it draws from you outweighs any benefit, that's where we run into some real serious problems here in terms of being out of control.
And the other, we'll just repeat, is gambling, impulsive sexual activity, shoplifting, or overspending.
To name a few.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of things that we can be looking at.
And
here.
in our area, gambling is prevalent, so there are a lot of people with problems in that area.
There are. And it's interesting that, from what I understand, at the casinos, they have a lot of help available for those who can be. And it's sort of an interesting combination when you think about it. Here, come here so we can essentially take your money, because that's what gambling is. People don't gamble to win. They gamble for the thrill of gambling. They gamble because it's an activity. It's something to do that has a level of excitement. If you gamble to win, you're going to be sorely disappointed. It's not a normal thing. But anyway, I don't want to spend time on gambling yet. We'll get to some specifics a little bit later on. Let's continue with a little bit more reading on determining what is an addiction. And folks, again, our phone number here is 860-442-6102.
An addiction is an example of a habit. Like other habits, addictive behaviors are learned behaviors that we acquire through trial and error. We happen to gamble for the first time, having known little about it, and experience it as exhilarating and captivating, or through observing others. Our parents had cocktails each evening before dinner to relax. If we have ongoing experiences with a substance or activity, and only if, we enjoy at least some aspect of that experience, an urge of craving for it gradually emerges after repeated experience. The urge is a way of saying to ourselves, I know this is going to be good. I will enjoy this. Someone who has never experienced a substance or activity cannot be addicted to it, nor will an addiction develop if the experience is not pleasurable. Because of the uniqueness of each individual, what is pleasurable for one person may not be for another. For instance, many individuals report not enjoying alcohol, even in small amounts. Such an individual would not ordinarily become addicted to alcohol. Paradoxically, in a very strong addiction, much of the original pleasure may no longer be experienced. In this case, the primary satisfaction comes from driving the uncomfortable urge away.